On demand of production group Gomselmash, research and production group Tribo-Fatigue, TV company Fil TV present. Surprises of Tribo-Fatigue. What is a Tribo-Fatigue? It is in Belarus, where a new science was born, Tribo-Fatigue, one of the most perspective fields in mechanics. Konstantin Frolov, Vice President of the Russian Academy of Science. The birth of a new science happens not so often nowadays. The authorities undoubtedly accredit to any state. The Republic of Belarus is the cradle of Tribo-Fatigue. It was acknowledged by the great scientist of our time, Vasily Strazev, Minister of Education and Science of the Republic of Belarus. The practical significance of the new science is quite essential. It allows one to study characteristics of materials, parts, units and entire structures in extremely short time and to optimize the use of expensive materials and structures when fabricating articles that is a crucial cost factor. Valery Zhmailik, General Director of Production Group Gomselmash. The problems of the development of aircraft cosmic equipment, atomic energetics, engineering facilities for conquering the ocean, deep entrails of the Earth, the creation of artificial joints, heart valves, different organs of a man and an animal, the industrial development of high-density magnetic recording, the improvement of reliability of a new generation of machines and mechanisms, rising the efficiency, accuracy and safety are closely linked with the level of knowledge of tribology, corrosion, fatigue, with an understanding of the phenomena of the above-mentioned processes which occur simultaneously. This direction may be called Tribo-Fatigue. Yuri Drozdov, academician of the Academy of Cosmonautics of Russia. Tribo-Fatigue. It is serious. Not only mutual influence of factors, but also interaction of effects are the objects that Tribo-Fatigue learns. Leonid Sosnovsky, Tribo-Fatigue founder. This presentation was prepared with the help of the following publications. Surprises of Tribo-Fatigue are the phenomena, situations and regularities that are related to damage or fracture of Tribo-Fatigue systems. The scientist could not observe, comprehend and describe them analytically before Tribo-Fatigue. By the present moment, 9 surprises of Tribo-Fatigue have been described. Tribo-Fatigue mystery, back effect, Tribo-Fatigue bomb, a gift from Tribo-Fatigue, trophy, motion, information, damage, Tribo-Fatigue entropy, Tribo-Fatigue life, mechanothermodynamics. Life of any organism develops in time. It is an axiom. Usually, life is calculated in years. By this scale, it is very difficult to compare lives of different organisms of different longevity. It means different periods from birth to death. Besides, the value of longevity has not been completely determined. For example, every human has his own longevity, and it can change practically from the first day to 150 years. That's why one needs to introduce a concept of relative lifetime. By this scale, it's easy to compare and estimate the time an organism has run through. They say he lived a half of life, a quarter of life, 3/4 of life, and so on. Such a scale of relative lifetime has a principal meaning. Two fundamental points of life of any organisms, birth and death, are determined there. Point of birth, relative lifetime equal to 0. Point of death, relative lifetime equal to a unity. The first numerical description of temporal process of life is given in this way. But this is certainly a poor description. Indeed, there is no word about the mean, what the life is. What is life? It is a known and extremely intricate question that had never been answered exhaustively by anybody. Nevertheless, everybody tries to answer it, reasoning from his own experience. The sciences in the domain of Tribo-Fatigue also try to answer that sacramental question regarding the living organism from the Tribo-Fatigue viewpoint. The object of the research is the complex biological system, a human. Any organism is in conditions of constant friction, wear, and fatigue. Muscles of our extremities get tired from walking and working. The walls of blood vessels become thinner. The mitral valve deforms and rubs away. Teeth crash because of wear. Surfaces of joints crumble. So, life is a specific way of damage accumulation. Damage is any change of composition or structure, hence of the properties and functions of the organism as a whole, or any of its parts, no matter how small it is. Damages can be local and integral. They occur at different scale levels: a cell, a tissue, an organ, a system, and the organism as a whole. Damages appear and accumulate under the effect of life load, the most intricate combination of mechanical, biological, socio-economic, moral and physiological, energy, ecological, medical and other phenomena and factors. The heavier the load and longer it acts, the more are the damages, irreversible and reversible. When load grows, the damages reach some critical value and the organism dies. Hence, to live a life is to cross a space, one measure of which is time and the other measure is damage. In this way, the second scale appears, the scale of damages, which is a function of time. On this basis, one can formulate a sufficiently general law of life of any organism in any conditions. Some definite damage corresponds to a given relative age. Now, one can write the condition of death by damage. The meaning of function of damage in the moment of death is equal to unity. It means that an organism dies when damages reach the limiting value equal to a unity. The condition of birth by damage should be recorded in this way. In the moment of birth, when the relative lifetime is near 0, the meaning of the function of damage will be very small, almost non-dimensional. But nevertheless, this meaning is more than 0, and it means that the life of an organism cannot help starting without damage even negligibly small. That's why, wherever and whatever conditions an organism lives, the damage accumulation is inevitable, and it means that the death of an organism is also inevitable. How can one walk on the field of life? What kind of the life way of any organism can be in principle? In fact, it's enough to point only 4 types of the ways which are fundamentally different. 4 different means of damage accumulation determine 4 basic types of lives: genetic, Rakhmetov's, Oblomov's, and mixed ones. But all of them have one fundamental final. When the level of damage becomes critical or limit, the death of an organism comes. In such a case, the function of damage reaches a unity. The first type is genetic life of an organism, which is in ideal environment when the life evolves progressively and regularly, and every step in life is in fact the same step towards death. At the same time, the life load should be constant, and during the same periods of time the organism should get the same damage. If perhaps an organism has lived the half of his genetic longevity, so he has accumulated the half of damage. The contrary statement is also taken for granted. If the damage of an organism has reached its half of the critical meaning, it means that he has lived half of his life. Thus, genetic type of life can be displayed as an identity of damage and relative age of an organism under constant life load. In other words, under all constant factors and phenomena affecting an organism, which are determined by energetic interaction with the environment and also the action of single organs of an organism. The idea of an ideal life gives us an opportunity to understand what the other types of non-ideal life are, that is, a usual life. The second, Rakhmetov's type of life, is graphically shown by the concave curve. Here, for the purpose of comparison, the dotted line shows the genetic life. The main characteristic feature of Rakhmetov's type of life is the fact that in any relative age, the level of damage of a usual organism is always smaller than the level of damage of an ideal organism of the same age. So, if the relative age is equal to 0.5, the damage of an ideal organism is 0.5, while the damage of a usual organism of Rakhmetov's type is significantly less, just 0.12. In effect, Rakhmetov's type of life is determined by the phenomena of constant hardening of an organism from the very beginning until the end of his life. These can be physical training, medical and biological means of disease prevention, and etc. The simplest model of Rakhmetov's type of life can be shown as a power function, where the parameter Q determines the extent, i.e., the rate or intensity of hardening. The greater the parameter Q, the stronger is the hardening, and the smaller is the level of damage of a usual organism of Rakhmetov's type of life, in comparison with an ideal organism of the same relative age. That is why Q is called the optimistic parameter. The third, Oblomov's type of a usual life, is shown graphically as the convex curve. The main characteristic feature of Oblomov's type of life is the fact that at any relative age, the level of damage of a usual organism is always greater than the level of damage of an ideal organism of the same relative age. So if, for example, at the age of 0.5, the damage of an ideal organism is 0.5, while the damage of a usual organism of Oblomov's type is significantly more, 0.86. In effect, Oblomov's type of life is determined by the phenomena of softening of an organism from the very beginning until the end of his life. It can be weakening of the proper action of medical and biological means of disease prevention, absence of necessary physical training, presence of bad habits, and etc. The simplest model of Oblomov's type of life can be shown as a power function where the parameter H determines the extent, i.e. the rate or intensity of softening. The greater is the parameter H, the graver is the softening and the greater is the level of damage of a usual organism of Oblomov's type in comparison with an ideal one of the same age. In this connection, the parameter H is called pessimistic. The fourth mixed type of a usual life is shown by the S-shaped curve. With this lifestyle, the phenomena of hardening and softening alternate consecutively. Hence, the main characteristic feature of the mixed type of life is the fact that at different relative age, the level of damage can be more, less than, or equal to the level of damage of an ideal organism of the same relative age. So, if the relative age is equal to 0.4 or 0.8, the damage of an ideal organism is also 0.4 or 0.8. In this case, the damage of a usual organism of mixed type is 0.19 or 0.95 respectively. This type of life is determined by mixed behavior of an organism that does the best for its hardening, or does nothing, the zone of transition, or does the best for its softening. The model of the mixed type of life can be shown as a power function with two parameters. Enlargement of the parameter H and Q leads to the corresponding hardening of deviations of damage level more or less from an ideal meaning. If H is equal to a unity and Q is equal to a unity, we get model of genetic type of life. If H is equal to a unity and Q is more than a unity, the formula transforms into the model of Rakhmetov's type of life. If H is more than a unity and Q is equal to a unity, we get the model of Oblomov's type of life. Hence, the mixed type of life is the most general and it can be called basic or ordinary, whereas Rakhmetov's and Oblomov's types are specific as if they were exceptions from the main rule. Unlike a usual non-ideal life, in real life a human can be affected by social and force majeure conditions. Social conditions can be good and they further growth of lifetime. For example, life load is getting lower, hence damage is getting lower too. If the conditions are bad, they determine the decrease of human longevity. For example, life load is growing and the damage is growing too. For instance, the lifetime in reality can be corrected by the different damage in the aggregate: disease, social disorder, force majeure circumstances. For example, a shot and as a result untimely death comes. Bad social conditions can be called a trouble, good ones a well-being. The impact of the social conditions and force majeure circumstances on the level of damage is considered in the model using the dialectic function, in which gamma is the parameter of well-being and beta is the parameter of trouble. In boundary cases, the dialectic function splits up into the function of well-being at beta equal to a unity and the function of trouble at gamma equal to unity. Trouble and well-being in qualitative point developed in different ways. Trouble can be arbitrarily large. The growth of the parameter of trouble beta leads to the increase of function of trouble and the level of damage, and this fact determines the reduction of life. Well-being cannot be arbitrarily large, but can be arbitrarily small. The function of well-being becomes damped. It verges towards zero, but never reaches it. That's why no matter how much the value of the parameter of well-being, gamma, changes, the function of well-being appears to be enclosed in strictly limited interval, less than a unity, more than a zero. So, two parameters, well-being and trouble, manage social dialectic function. One controls trouble, the other controls well-being. Their correlation determines social conditions of real life. If trouble grows without any control, it leads towards mass in the society and acts as a force majeure circumstances. And if well-being increases greatly, it leads towards welfare of people. Hence, in the dialectic function, contrary processes of trouble and well-being fight with each other, and it appears that trouble is always a stronger process than well-being is. This is, for example, the essence of force majeure conditions in reality. In this case, the dialectic function is growing fast, and it means that the deadly damage is being reached also fast. So we can describe the phenomena of life not only in a qualitative, but also in a quantitative sense. As a conclusion, there is a thesis. Develop an image of the field of life of organisms. Let's have a new look at the phenomena of life and make an analysis of not only its common peculiarities, but also state and understand its characteristic features. This idea is really true and has no contradictions or disagreement with the existing laws in science. Further, rather interesting and fascinating investigations are necessary to understand and realize deeply the phenomena of life with the philosophical point of view. On the other side, let us notice the profit of the development approach to the philosophy itself. It will have new quantitative methods. The opportunity to add concrete quantitative analysis to qualitative conclusions and comparisons is a